Tonight we're going to be in Mark chapter 6. We're going to look at verses 30 through 44, which is, as I mentioned on Sunday, the only miracle performed by Jesus that's in all four gospel accounts, and that's the feeding, what's known as the feeding of the 5,000. And so we're going to just break this down into a couple of chunks. It's one of my pastor buddies. We'll just let that go to voicemail.
You should know I've been to call you on Wednesday night.
Obviously, he doesn't have Bible study at 6 o'clock.
I mean, we got somebody else on the phone. We can add him.
That's a good thought.
Yeah, tell him to get his heart right. So that's Pastor Barney. We'll be together on Sunday for the sunrise service. So we want to first look at this preparatory section in verses 30 through 34, which I've entitled "The Crowd," and you'll notice this in quotes, follows Jesus to the wilderness. You'll understand what the quotes are about as we read this passage, but we'll start in verse, and I read from the New King James, so it may be a little bit off from your translation, but it should be close. It says, "Then the apostles gathered to Jesus and told him all things, both what they had done and what they had taught. And he said to them, 'Come aside by yourselves to a deserted place and rest a while. For there are many coming and going, and they did not even have time to eat.' So they departed to a deserted place in the boat by themselves. But the multitude saw them departing, and many knew him and ran there on foot from all the cities. They arrived before them, came together to him. And Jesus, when he came out, saw a great multitude and was moved with compassion for them because they were like sheep not having a shepherd." And so a couple of weeks ago, we had talked about the fact that Jesus had sent out the 12 in their first evangelistic missionary activity in the general area. Last week, we looked at John the Baptist being beheaded. And so when you look at this verse 30, it says they gathered to Jesus and told him all things. They're reflecting back on when he had sent them out 2 by 2 to go out into the community and evangelize. And so this is their report back. And so when they get here, Jesus, here's what they've got to say. And he says, "Guys, time to rest. Time to take a break." Okay, but you'll notice also that it says, and this is the second time in Mark's gospel we've seen this, where they're so busy, they don't even have time to eat. And so let's take a rest. Let's get something to eat. It's a good thing the Lord does that, right? He wants us to have rest. He wants us to be refreshed. And so that's what he's doing here with the crowd. And then so the crowd, knowing Jesus, they hightail it. He gets in a boat with the disciples and heads across the Sea of Galilee. They're hoofing it by foot around the lake. And they get there first. And they're waiting for him when he gets there. And I got to admit, when I read this and I think about that, and he's just told them, let's take a break. Let's get something to eat. Let's recharge. And they come up on the shore, and there's this huge crowd. And I got to think my first response will be, ugh. I mean, that's what I would do. You need a break sometimes, right? But we find out that that's not Jesus's way of operating. He has compassion for him. And so that's why he's our Lord and I'm not. Because he probably could be angry about that. But instead, what does he do? He begins to teach, is what it says in Mark's gospel. Now, I want to stop here because I think it's really important. You guys might have noticed, and those of you who have not been with us before, this is new to you. Off to the right-hand side, I put these little bubbles. And what they are for is they show us what the parallel passages are in the other Gospels. And this has been the first time, I think, in this entire study, gang, right? That we've actually had John programming in. We've not had John prior to this. And so this will be John's first time. And I just want to say this up front. John does not follow the other guys. He does his own thing. So if you and we're not going to do it tonight, I would encourage you to go back and read Matthew and Luke and John and see the differences in these four accounts. But John's got a different agenda than Matthew and Luke do. And so he goes a little bit in different direction. But the details are there just a little bit different. But I thought it'd be important to kind of talk about what some of the differences are in the accounts. And so in Matthew, where he has it placed in his gospel, it seems like he ties their move to go where they go for the feeding of the 5,000, where that happens. He seems to tie that more to John's beheading. Okay. And it does follow, right, in Luke, right? I mean, it just happened in Luke. I'm sorry, in Mark. It just happened. And then we see him talking to them. But Matthew seems to have a little more of a connection to that. And we talked about that when we looked at that a while back. It's not like he was running away. It's just John mattered to Jesus. He did. He was his cousin. Yeah. And this was a major deal. And so Matthew seems to tie not just them needing a rest to get away, but also that this was a traumatic time for them. And so they needed to get away. And there's also been the conversation that it could have been for safety's purposes as well, just to think about it that way. And then also in Matthew, not only does Jesus teach, which we see in Mark, but Matthew also says Jesus heals the people as well. Okay. Actually, no, he doesn't say he teaches. He says Jesus healed the people. And then in Luke says Jesus healed and taught. And so you kind of bring that all together. Luke also makes the point that this is near Bethsaida, which is where some of these guys are from. And then John adds a couple of really neat little pieces. He makes the point that Passover is soon, which that pinpoints it to being the spring of the year. And you'll notice that as we go through the account of the feeding of the 5,000, it talks about people sitting on green grass. That would have been the time of year where that would have happened. And so it gives us a little bit of a dial in on what time of the year it was. And then John also just happens to mention that they go up on a mountain to do this. So that's just so I said it. And there's other pieces, and we'll talk about them as we get down into the next section, some of the other variations on the theme. But I want to start there because I don't know if you guys realize this. Maybe you do. Maybe you've been accosted with this before. But some people have a real hard time with the fact that the different gospel accounts don't totally jive with each other 100%. And so they'll start to call that out as a problem with the Bible. Well, there's contradictions in the gospel accounts. But why do you think the gospel accounts differ? Why would these, and I'm just gonna let me preface this before I open the floor to you guys. The basis of my teaching on the Word of God and our belief, most of us, maybe all of us, is that even though they are human authors, the ultimate author of the Word of God is the Holy Spirit. All right. And so he's the one that inspired the writers to write what they wrote. But he obviously gave them some freedom. But the ultimate author is God. And so why do you think the gospel accounts would differ? What would be the purpose for doing that, do you think? Go ahead, John.
My understanding is that each individual had their own personality and they had their own area of ministry. And that when they wrote the Gospels, they wrote not only an account, but they wrote for that particular audience that they were ministering to. So, for instance, Matthew was very interested in the Jews.
Right.
And so his account is directed towards Jews. Luke was kind of more interested in not only getting it right because of his scientific background, but he was also interested in not including the Gentiles in his conversation. Mm-hmm. So that would be one of the reasons why I would think that there would be discrepancies. But they're not really discrepancies. They're just different viewpoints of the same event.
Okay.
And the good thing for me is it gives color. When you read the Gospels, you see the humanity of us, and it opens my eyes to what life was like then, because they each have a little point of view. I heard someone say this morning that get it right. That the, never mind, I can't remember. It slips. It's a
I have that issue.
senior moment.
Senior moment. Okay, so your position on it is then is because they've got different audiences.
Yes,
That there would be a different focus
exactly.
from each writer.
Yes.
Okay, all right, that's pretty solid. Other thoughts? Online?
Yeah, I totally agree with the audiences and the layout is right. There's also different themes that they work on, which partly has to do with the audiences they're addressing. Usually regard Matthew as, because he's talking to the Jews, it's a very messianic theme. You know, it's dealing with the prophecy of the Old Testament being fulfilled. Not that the others don't touch it, but he's the heaviest on it. He's presenting a king. He's presenting a prophet. Mark is much more about the service aspect, and Mark is usually considered a companion to Peter, so it's heavily based on Peter's preaching that you kind of get glimpses of in the Book of Acts. So it's sort of a detailed version of what Peter was talking about that whole time, as a coloring or as a accompaniment to what Matthew had already written down. Matthew was the earliest. Where Luke was a companion of Paul, so not necessarily a eyewitness personally, but given Paul's revelation, given their integration into the existing Church of Jerusalem, but now they have to go talk to the Greeks, who are very much logical and just want the story. They want the hero story. It's very much a humanity type of a presentation. You know, you're talking about some big godly guy, and you have to say, no, he's human too. He's just as human as the rest of us.
Yeah.
And that's important, you know, as compared to all the legends about Roman emperors and all the legends from Greek mythology. John is later on and has a very high Christology. It's like the very, very big on the divinity aspect, because a lot of that had started to get watered down or come into doubt by the time John was writing his gospel. And then consider that they are built on each other chronologically. So there's a whole lot of, well, I just want to piggyback on what that guy said, and then there's this. So instead of trying to restate everything the exact same way, it's, okay, you know that part, but here within this context, this audience and this theme, here's the story.
That's great. So you guys are on board with kind of the same path.
Yeah.
Audience, theme, focus, all those sorts of things. Other thoughts in the room or not in the room?
Yeah, Pastor. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead, bro. Then I got you, Kurt, after that.
So I certainly agree with my brothers weighing in beforehand, but one of the things to consider is even if the Holy Spirit brings back to their memory the events that they experienced, they weren't aware that they were in history as it was going. So, and for the most part, with the exception of maybe Luke, none of these guys were historians. So, if Trent's expertise lends itself to flying, so if Trent and I go to a Blue Angels show and I'm watching the same show right next to him, and we both do a report for our school paper, Trent's gonna stress some things that I don't even know I should be looking for. And then there are probably some elements that will appeal to me during the show that Trent just considers that so mundane he wouldn't even mention it. So when we take and we put the four different guys and their perspectives, what we do is kind of, if you think about J. Warner Wallace in Cold Case, this is one of the ways that forensically you figure out if witnesses are viable, because they shouldn't be seeing the exact same thing. And when we take a look at the four of these guys writing, there's a harmony because they're not telling you exactly all the little same details that are the same.
That's a really good point. You know, if it was exactly the same, you'd say, well, they got together ahead of time, contrived the whole thing,
Yeah, exactly.
right? Which would kind of ring really.
Which is why detectives, when they interview people, they make sure they're separate from everyone else so that they're they're picking up the nuances.
Mhm.
This person saw this part, but this person didn't. And otherwise you're flavoring and it becomes, everyone's got the same story.
That's it. Yeah, I mean, if you're investigating a crime, and let's just say it's a car theft, right? You want to hear certain things, right? It was a specific make and model, most likely, right? And you're looking for somebody that everybody kind of saw. But yeah, you're right. It could be any number of other things that come out of that. So that's really good. That's a really good thought, Kurt.
Well, from what I understand, they were all writing many years later. So it wasn't all at the same time either. They were at different time frames. So, and also, I don't know if they were able to read, like the first one that wrote was the second one before he wrote, able to read what the first one put down or not. But in any case, if they were able to see what was written, maybe they would go, gosh, you didn't add this or didn't think about that I remember, and I think it's important. So that may have happened. I don't know.
Well, that's what Trent was talking about. In particular, John. John was the anchor man. And so, and I mean, anchor man is in the fourth guy in the relay.
Right.
And so he had the benefit of those others coming before. And so he did get to fill in some of the flavor there, if you will. You know, there's, I don't think I've done it. I think I've done it at Kona Coast, but it's probably been 3 or 4 years ago. I did a Palm Sunday sermon. I call up to Jerusalem. And what I do is I do it like, you guys remember, there was an old show when I was a kid called You Were There with Walter Cronkite,
Oh, yeah.
where they go back in history,
Yeah.
they go back to a historical event, and they report on it. And I do that sermon kind of like that. But what I do is I take the 4 gospel accounts of the triumphal entry. Because when you take the 4, it's almost like you set up 4 cameras and you're watching the event from different people's perspective. And no one of them gets it all, but all together, it's this really neat tapestry of the event. And so, yeah, I think that and the reason I ask this question, folks, is really it's an apologetic question. Because as we talk to people about the Word of God, that's one of the things you probably have all, if any of you have talked to people about the Bible, they bring up the contradictions in Scripture. And they're not there. They don't exist. And there's a lot of things that people who are enemies of the gospel, or at least not believers of the gospel, will bring up, and that's one of the big ones. But as we can kind of say what we just said here today, and it keeps the conversation going. And it's like, well, let's go look at those contradictions you think you saw.
Yeah.
And let's find out what those were all about.
Just to expound even a little bit more, I mean, I can picture 5,000 people. The apostles weren't like just glued to Jesus. They're being attentive to their groups or 5,000 or meeting some of their needs.
Yes.
And they may not have heard everything exactly, the same way. And so when you culminate that all together, I think, like John was saying, it adds some spice to it.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I know we're doing the sunrise service this Sunday morning, and there's going to be probably 15 of us pastors that are involved. And I guarantee you, if you catch all 15 of us afterwards and say, write down what you did, what happened, it's going to look radically different across the board.
Yeah.
We'll get some of the facts right. Oh yeah, Kaloha preached. The sun came up, but beyond that, I don't know what else we'll agree on. So that's really good.
Beach.
Well, that's almost at the beach on the park. Yeah. So, okay, well, good. I'm glad you folks kind of grabbed onto that, because I think that's a really vital part of the Gospels, is understanding why we have 4, quite frankly. I mean, it's a big part. And so with that, we come to the actual feeding. And you'll notice that I titled it Jesus Feeds a Multitude, because we'll find out at the end it's 5,000 men plus women and children. So I've heard numbers ramp up 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. It really just depends on how many wives and kids were out there. Maybe even some nephews and cousins, and who knows what else might have been there. So 5,000 men. But let's look at the account. And again, I would encourage you to go read the parallels in your own free time if you've not done it recently. It says, let me see, we're in verse 35. It says, when the day was now far spent, his disciples came to him and said, this is a deserted place, and already the hour is late. Send them away that they may go into the surrounding country and the villages and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat. But he answered and said to them, you give them something to eat. And they said to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give them something to eat? I'll talk about that question in a minute. But he said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. When they found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. Then he commanded them to make them all sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in ranks, in hundreds and in 50s. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven, blessed and broke the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fish he divided among them all. So they all ate and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of fragments and of the fish. Now those who had eaten the loaves were about 5,000 men. And so what the commentators have said about this is this crowd was bigger than the surrounding towns. I mean, they could not have handled 20,000 people descending on them. When I hear this, I think about my sister. She went to Clemson University, which is in western South Carolina. And it's been said many times that on football Sundays, or football Saturdays, which football is king in Clemson, when it's a football Saturday, that stadium is like the 3rd largest city in South Carolina. I mean, it's massive, 75,000 or 80,000 fans at that game. And so I can't imagine if they said, okay, you guys know, there's going to be no concessions at the game. You're going to have to go out into the surrounding areas. They'd probably be they'd be down in northern Georgia before they got done finding a place. So this crowd was really massive compared to what was around them. And so it would have been very difficult late in the day. And if you guys remember going back and reading in the Old Testament, there's a few different passages I can think of where people would wander into a town looking for a place to stay. That might sound somewhat familiar. I think of Mary and Joseph looking for a place to stay one time. You know, people were counting on the good graces of the people in these neighborhoods. And so it was going to be difficult for them to find food this late in the day. And so you'll notice my notes, I said the disciples get a little bit snarky with Jesus when he tells them to feed the crowd. And I mean, their question, and you know, Mark does this better than the other gospel accounts from the standpoint, he is a little more unvarnished about the responses of people to Jesus than the other gospels. Sometimes they'll kind of not downplay, but he just kind of puts it right out there in front of you. And again, that's him right into the Roman mind, I guess. But you know, they're basically saying, so what? We're going to like ramp up this money and go find the food somewhere, right? I mean, they're pretty incredulous, actually. And so what you need to know is 200 denarii, that'd be like 8 months' pay for a day worker. That's a ton of money. Judas probably didn't have that in a money bag, is the point. It wasn't there. They didn't have it, probably. See, Preston, why are you doing your head like that? You think he had 200?
Yeah, I think they might have had it. Philip doesn't respond in the way that says we can't do it. He just sort of says, should we go and do it?
Yeah. Well, you know what? And that, to your point, maybe if they did have that might have blown the treasury, though. Put a hole in it at least, right? So
to what end? It's not, you know, as we pointed out, it's not like those towns could have handled it anyway. Who cares where the money came from? I mean, he has compassion for the people, the crowd, but he's got compassion for the locals. He doesn't want to overstay his welcome.
That's a good point. Yeah, all of a sudden the hordes come down the hill. Yeah, not such a good thing. You mentioned Philip, Preston, over in John's gospel, he explains that Jesus asked the question to test Philip. So it's an interesting, and he doesn't really spend a lot of time on that, but he asked the question expecting Philip to kind of get on board with what he's doing. But I asked the question right here: what test would Jesus be presenting to Philip at this point? Do you think? Tell you what, before you answer the question, let's go look at that just quick, that little chunk of John's, and it's over in chapter 6 of John. And let's do it at verse 5. John 6:5. It says, "And Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, 'Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?' But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do." So John's letting us know Jesus already has the plan. Okay, that's a little piece that we might need. And Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may eat a little. So that's just the exchange, this quick exchange that Jesus and Philip have. And Philip was of the mindset, this kind of speaks to what Trent just said, even if they had the 200 denarii and they went and were able to buy food, it would hardly be enough to feed the people. And so you think about it really from a stewardship perspective, it probably wouldn't be good to blow their treasury to basically give everybody a snack. It's kind of the point that the disciples were. So what test would Jesus be presenting to Philip at this point, do you think?
His belief, maybe?
In? His belief in?
In Christ himself.
Okay.
Because he's already, if I'm not mistaken, this is after he already fed a group of people?
No, 4,000's coming. 4,000's later.
All right, okay. Then I'm.
But he's done a ton of miracles.
Exactly. So it's basically, he's saying, do you believe me? Do you believe that I can do this? And do you trust me? That's the real key. Because, if you've ever done any of those trust walks, trust things, Kay and I did one where we had to be on a tightrope. And we had to push on each other to walk through. And I'm a little taller than she is, and a heck of a lot more upper body strength. So I had to give in order for us to get across this tightrope. And the big thing was, do we trust each other enough to get across this? And so, that's kind of, Philip, do you trust me?
Okay. All right. Even though he'd seen all the other stuff.
Exactly.
He wasn't there when she got raised from the dead, but he'd done a lot of things. Other thoughts? That's a good thought. You guys agree? Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, perhaps, he saw the miracles curing people, and he wasn't around for the wine at the wedding in Cana. But if he saw people being, whether they were lepers or whether they were crippled, he didn't know anything about coming up with food.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one thing to cure somebody of leprosy. It's another thing to feed 5,000 people.
All right. So that kind of goes with John. But what I hear you saying is, not only do you trust me, but do you trust me for everything?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. You can do this.
Right.
Yeah.
You can walk on water. You can calm the seas, but can you feed 5,000 people?
Actually, been walking on the waters next week, so we get to that next week. But the point is, you've healed people, you've driven out demons, you've done all these different things. But is this beyond you?
Past your
too much, right? And we see Jesus, and who is it that was talking about? Historians. One of you guys were talking about historians. Yeah, Preston. We have the benefit of 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Right. They're living it. They're in the middle of it. They're still trying to figure out who. Don't apologize for the phrase. Who this guy is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I think too, he wanted to see that, see if Philip was on board with everything that he was doing.
Well, yeah, there you go.
Sit down.
All these different things,
Sure.
everything. So,
Right. So not only does he trust, but is he committed to the cause?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Almost.
Go ahead.
Well, before, Jesus had been healing people. He hadn't been creating stuff. This is creating something out of nothing.
Exactly.
And they hadn't seen that before.
And he didn't have a 3D printer.
You didn't have a 3D printer.
So I don't think they could imagine it yet, that this could actually happen.
Yeah, yeah, okay, all right, that's good, because that's adding a new type of miracle to his repertoire,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
Well, and then I guess my thought too is I'm thinking we're getting late in the day. You've got a crowd of at least 5,000 people who are starting to get hungry. And not only do you trust Jesus to do this, but if you don't, or if you do and he fails, then what is this crowd going to do to the disciples, to Jesus, to, it's like, it's one of those where, okay, yeah, I trust you, but what if this doesn't really work?
You're
And
gonna
you've
have,
got
This is the
this,
language
then
they
you,
use across.
right? Then you've got this crowd that's not going to be happy.
yeah, yeah. So it's one thing if you disappoint one guy,
Right,
another thing if you disappoint enough people that they could do something about it.
right.
But I think it's interesting what you said, Bruce. Like, do we have the benefit of history? Because I grew up listening to Bible studies. I grew up in church. I grew up in Sunday school. And we were just talking the other day having coffee, and I'm telling you how my faith is still growing.
Yeah,
And so if I'm grasping to walk into these things
okay.
with the Bible, with 35, 40 years of hearing it, these guys didn't even have, what they say, you need 10,000 hours to become proficient at something. Whether that's right or wrong, that's not the point. But they didn't even have anything close to that. There was no, Moses parting the Red Sea or something, but we have all of it, the New Testament, the Old Testament, and I still find myself challenged to step into faith.
The only thing they had in common was hearing two words: "Follow me."
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it's mind-boggling. And for testing of Philip, Jesus knows he's not always going to be there, and the task is going to be passed onto their shoulders.
Yeah, that's what I was seeing as almost a black belt test. Tradition has it Philip was at the wedding at Cana where he saw the water get turned to wine. So it's not a totally unfamiliar idea that something food related could happen in a pinch. But Philip was also one of John the Baptist's disciples who made the jump to follow Jesus. So he's kind of a front runner type of guy. He's a star student, So here's Jesus. He's going to tell this group of people, go make disciples of the world. Well, before you can tell them to do that, that's the ultimate lesson is I got to make sure you're going to be there when I tell you to do that. I need to make you black belts before you can go make other black belts. So here, Philip, you're in the lead. You're head of the class, or at least near the front. Here's a great chance. What would you do if you were, what would Jesus do? And it's an opportunity for Philip to give a great, star-spangled answer. And Philip says, well, it'd be, if I did my green eye shade calculations right and carry the two, it would read, And Jesus is like, no, that's not not what we're looking for here.
It's interesting. I want to go back to what Nathaniel said, because I think this is where we take this from 28 AD to 2022, right? Is that they had seen so much, but there was still, will you do it this time? Will you do it this time? And we think about it in our own lives, and just I think we've got to think application on all this too. Is, Lord, is this going to be the time when you don't? Right. And that's very human. It's incredibly human, right? And I think in our dark moments and our dark times and our worst situations, there's the accuser back there saying, maybe this time God's going to fail you.
Yeah.
Right? That as much as he has done, as often as he has done, this may be the time. And I think we learned that from this testing. It's like he's saying, I've got it in every circumstance, even when the stakes are high. And if I don't do it, it's going to be trouble. I still got it.
Yeah.
But we still have to go there. We still have to go there. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I think we all have those moments.
All the time.
I think we do.
I was gonna, our pastor a few months ago, he was talking about when Jesus was confronted by, I guess when he was on trial.
Excuse me.
And they said, you know, do this miracle, do that miracle. And he said, no matter how many miracles I do, you still won't believe. You still, you know, you'll still be asking for more and more. And just when are you going to start believing? When can I finally stop? I thought that was really very interesting, because after all that he had done, there were still people who were, I don't believe it.
Absolutely. And that would be that way today too, by the way.
But I mean, that's what he's talking to. He's talking to every generation.
Right?
Those words are then for now.
Exactly.
You know, it's like he knows how we're all wired, and it's going to be that's one of the things we don't need in heaven is faith.
Yeah.
Amen. We're there.
We have one time to exercise faith, and that's while we're alive.
Well, that's why I've always thought that's why John, Paul writes, you know, of these three things, faith, hope, and love. The greatest of these is love. Faith and hope. One day we won't need that, but it's love that's going to bring us in glory.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of the father who came to Jesus and wanted him to heal. I think it was his daughter who was sick, or maybe it was his son who had demons. And Jesus looked at him in the face and said, do you believe? Do you believe? And he said, yes, I believe. Help my unbelief.
My unbelief. Yeah.
And that is, for me personally, I need that every minute of every day. I'm living in a world that's hostile, and I'm trying to keep my faith constant and true, but there are times when I get full of myself and I become a hypocrite. Or there's times when I just you know, I take it all back. You know, I got a daughter who's sick, and I'm panicking about it. And can you do this, Lord? Well, I know He can do it if He wants to. Mm-hmm. And that's what the father said to him. You can do this if you want to. And he says, do you believe? So to me, that wraps all of this up together, so that the faith is founded. And then when he does the miracle, not only will Philip see it and experience it, but he'll own it.
Own it. That's a great word for that, John. Catherine.
Makes me think of that scripture, blessed is the man who believes but yet has not seen.
Yeah, what Jesus said after Thomas
Yeah.
saw and believed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's true. Blessed are the ones who have not seen and yet believe.
Yeah.
Preston, you got that something?
Yeah, Pastor Bruce. I think there's some really neat points that are being made, and I can endorse a lot of those, especially in current day. But I think that when we take a look at the time when this happened, and your question being, what was he intending to do with Philip? I think we've got to revisit what Trent said a little bit, because I think that there's a lot of import here, and here's where some of that lies. I think when you take a look at the 12 at this point, surprisingly, Peter isn't included in this. There are two big faith guys that are a part of these 12. And those two big faith guys are the guys that Trent mentioned. He alluded to one and he mentioned the other. So the two big faith guys are Andrew and Philip. And Philip and Andrew, we know Andrew was with John the Baptist, and we know Philip knew Andrew. But we also know, and this is kind of cool that he's with you tonight, Philip is the come and see guy. So when he's recruiting his friend Nathaniel, he tells Nathaniel, when Nathaniel says, what good can come out of Nazareth? His response is come and see. So the two faith linchpins of the 12 are Philip and Andrew. So Jesus does this thing, and this was just alluded to. Is that John in the room? Who's the last guy who was just talking about the father with the son that we're going to see coming up soon with the demon?
That was John.
Who was that?
That was John. Just
okay.
The camera over here.
So Jesus does this colloquially, this trust faith thing a few times. He does it then, or he responds that way when we meet this father with the demon-possessed son. He's going to do this same thing with Mary and Martha, which is partly why he weeps. But this is the other one where he encounters Philip to say, you're the faith guy. Let's do something about this situation. And Philip is not necessarily ready to take that leap of faith this far, even though, like Trent said, yeah, he was at the wedding at Cana. He has seen all the miracles up to this point, but even the faith guy is not ready to take this particular leap of faith yet. So the question that he asked Jesus is one that has to do with the cashola, as opposed to the question Philip probably should have asked is, Master, what do you have planned to do?
Amen.
Yeah, and I like that. I like the fact that when Trent was talking about he had to put on his green visor and work the numbers. Yeah, but we do that in the Christian faith all the time. Is that instead of anticipating, and this is, I think you guys have all hit on this, instead of anticipating God doing something different than maybe he's ever done before in our lives. And God is, I heard somebody say, this is not my original. I heard somebody say, God created creativity, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, God created creativity. And so he knows how to do things and get the job done, so to speak. But so often we run into, and this is what you guys are talking about, when you run into the unknown, now you fall back on, how can I fix this? What can I do? Right? As opposed to, Preston, I like the way you asked the question. Lord, what are you planning to do? Right? And that's been my terrible prayer. When the worst prayer I pray is this: Lord, help me figure this out.
Right.
Right? Isn't that the worst prayer ever? As opposed to, Lord, show me. And because when I try to figure it out, it's always a big mess. So.
Another thing I was getting at with the what would Jesus do comment, I think the test is not so much to say, what would Jesus do? He would do something amazing. What would Jesus do? He would do something miraculous. What would Jesus do is he would do something compassionate.
Indeed.
Like I said, it's an object lesson. Consider, especially the way Matthew tells it, he's just finished telling all these people what the kingdom is going to be like. And he's already starting to realize these people aren't really getting this. And then he's gone to his hometown and they rejected him. And then John the Baptist gets beheaded. Like, he's kind of, still being God, he's kind of going through some rough stuff. He's
got hurt a little bit at this point.
Right. He's getting a little beaten down by the reality of the people he's dealing with. And what's Jesus' response to these poor, wretched crowd of people that are following around desperate is compassionate. I want to feed these people. We're not going to send them to their own devices. We're going to take care of them. He was in kind of a melancholy mood maybe, but that was his reaction, which is an unusual reaction in that time. And like I said, he was trying to get these people ready for when he says, go make disciples of the world, the evangelistic mission that we all talk about. Well, what's the underlying rationale for evangelism is compassion for the world. You realize they're lost. They're sad, they're dying, they're hopeless until I go do something. And of course, it's not me doing the doing, it's me doing the telling. But if you don't care about all those other people that are out there lost and hopeless, then why would you even start? And I think Jesus wanted to say, look, I know, Philip, you're about to get out your accountant's ledger and figure out if anything is even possible. Back up a step. Do you even care that these people don't have options right now? I think he wanted to say, frame it in that way. Like, if we're going to do any of this, you're going to need to start with redeeming the world means caring that the world is there and has a problem.
I want to use that word problem you just had. I heard somebody talk about the fact that too often what we do, they were talking about Elon Musk. I remember somebody was talking about Elon Musk, and they were saying, they think that they said too many people that are entrepreneurs approach something from the idea of work the problem, right? And they said the reason that he's been so successful is because he doesn't see the problem. He just has a vision for what things can be. And that's a little bit different than what you're talking about, but it is that same idea. But what we do so often in our Christian world is we work the problem instead of, as you say, saying what is the best thing to do, not looking at it to fix something, but to improve something. Is a better way to approach that.
I mean, we see it in our own lives. How many people get that faint calling of, hey, I should, give that guy. Go buy an extra hamburger so that guy can eat today. I should go spend a little bit more time helping out around the church. I should go whatever. Well, the little thing is, what's the most common response in America? I really don't have time.
Yeah.
How is that different from 8 months of pay wouldn't take care of this problem? I really don't have time. I don't have the money. I don't have whatever. And here he is poking a hole in that 2,000 years ago.
What God can do through us.
Indeed.
He doesn't need much to create success.
Right.
But when we become the hands and feet, he can move them in the directions that he wants.
Absolutely.
The one account talks about the little boy who brought the fishes and the loaves. And so this little child was made instrumental in the feeding of the 5,000. Mm-hmm. And the disciples, they were passing this stuff out. They started the process. And then we know at the end, they gathered up way more than they started with.
Yep.
So, the creator of creativity is the total rock star. And it really does speak to Christ's compassion in that he felt responsible, or he desired to meet the physical needs.
Mm-hmm.
And, I read this earlier today, and it made me think of, Jesus is the best success coach of all time, by far, because the response he kind of got here from Philip was, I can't, as opposed to, how can I, or how can we, Lord? Kind of, to what he said. And, it's that power and compassion of not just wanting to help, but engaging others. And I think that's a big part of the lesson that came out of this for the 12, and certainly for me, in terms of, you may want to make a difference in the world. How do you do that? You invite others. It's Christ's party. We're just fellow attendees.
Right, that's right.
Right? So,
well, you make a good point, and I just want to touch on this, and I want to keep rolling, but it's so easy to become a one-man show, isn't it?
mm-hmm.
I run into that challenge being a pastor, as opposed to saying, "Hey, can you help? Can you help? Can you help?" And most times the answer is, "I don't know what to do." But you say, "I'll show you," or "Just come on along. It'll make sense when we get going." And that's when people are blessed, when they're actually part of the process, as opposed to just watching you do everything.
Yeah.
Nobody enjoys that.
Amen.
So, well, so it's interesting, I think, that Jesus assumes that there are loaves out there somewhere. So again, he knew what was happening. He knew what was going to go on. And just to say this out loud, just maybe put it in the mind of that little boy's mother. to pack a lunch.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he can play a few steps ahead. So you just think about that. He was at home that morning and mom says, here, let's put this in your basket. You need something for later today. And boom, that was going to end up being the impetus to feeding the 5,000. So just a thought there. But only John, and you folks mentioned this, only John attributes this to the young boy. He's the only one that mentions that this is a young boy that has the food. And he also notes that these are barley loaves. And it's important because barley loaves, of all the things that they could have had, was probably the smallest thing. And in my reading, it's like, these are like, I don't know if you guys are like I am, but I have a hard time eating Reese's peanut butter cup in less than its entire size. You know, just the whole thing.
Yeah.
Right. And but yeah, it's like 2 bites. Come on. Let's get that thing down. And so barley loaves are something that you could really almost like pop in your mouth and have several at a meal. Okay. So this wasn't, it's a young boy. So it was enough to feed him, but he wouldn't have gotten full necessarily or over full with that. So it wasn't very much. And so he sets them down in these groups. And I just want to take a minute on this. I don't think it's a huge thing we need to spend a lot of time on. But why do you think Jesus set people down in groups of 50? Why did he do that? What was the purpose between setting? What do you think, Kurt?
I got a theory.
Okay, here's your theory.
Well, they got fish, right? It's raw. They've got to cook it. So they're going to have to put a fire in the middle of each group to cook the fish.
Wow. I think the fish was already cooked.
Dehydrated.
It was probably salted.
Okay.
Right.
Well, that's
I love the theory, though.
Springer's working out.
Brother. Yeah. That's good. That's very cool. All right. Let's keep going. I like the fact, though, that you talked about there's a cohesion in that group. I like that. Let's stick with that, too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking that they could be a certain group of people that, were related maybe,
Okay.
or knew each other,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a number count, groups of 50 is easier to count than individually.
Okay.
Maybe having to do with the loaves or, something like that. So,
So you think it's kind of a crowd management type thing?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think there's some aspects to that.
But then where were all the people coming from? If there are groups of 100 or 50, and there are only 12 disciples, so what did he do? Get other people to then get involved?
To break them down into the groups?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe he started going, all right, start counting off. That's worked for me in the past. I'm not sure. And we don't really have a sense of how long this took. I mean, it was late, so it couldn't have taken too long to make this happen. So I don't know. I get the sense that the disciples, it was kind of Jesus and the 12. They were managing this project. So
If you have a whole group of people all together, are you going to know everybody got something? If you have them in small groups, then you can monitor what's going on, make sure everybody gets fed.
do you guys hear that? Yeah, I think that's got some legs to it. Not that, I think you guys are saying, I think there's an organization here, but what's the purpose, right, for the organization? And I'm going to go back to Trent's word, compassion, passion. What are you saying, Preston? This orderly positioning of the huge assemblage resembles another huge outdoor cafeteria song from the, what are you talking about?
Looks a little like Exodus.
All right, put a pin in that. I want to come back to Exodus in a minute, just because there's some craziness about Exodus too. But you said if you had a big crowd, how do you know if everybody got fed?
Exactly.
How would you know if everybody got fed? But if you had everybody in 50s, right, you can keep track. See, I think that's maybe the key to the whole thing. Jesus, in his compassion, wanted to make sure nobody got left out.
Jesus,
John?
Jesus broke the food up into baskets. And in order to feed everybody so that you would know they got fed, and for organizations level, you would probably send one half of the down one row and the other half down the other row, and they would pass the basket down to the end and then come back and either would refill the basket or go to the next aisle.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think you're,
Okay.
you ever been a church usher?
Yes.
That felt like a church usher. I have too, brother.
Pretty
I
awesome,
have to.
right?
And that sounded really, I'm on board with your process. I really am. I get that. Now, be careful on the wording of this, because we don't see the baskets show up until the end,
Right.
Right.
right? Now, in all fairness, read all 4 accounts. You can go read everything you want to about this thing and all the books everywhere. The one thing we never read about in this is how it happened.
Yes.
How did this,
The logistics.
how did the miracle occur?
Right.
Right? We don't, and the question has been asked, okay, so as they're giving out the bread, just this, because we have 5 barley loaves spread between 12 guys, and then Jesus broke it, and so as they were giving it, did it just
Like keep
keep
coming.
replicating? How did that work? We don't know the mechanics of the miracle, but it seems like he put it, and this goes back to what all of you have been saying, he put this in the hands of the disciples to be his workers. And so, at least in my reading of this stayed in their hands throughout. So I don't see anywhere where it was said that they would have traveled away from them. They were given that responsibility.
Okay.
And I think we can see that from what he said before, even like sending out the 12. He said, you're going to go out and you're going to do these miracles on my behalf as my apostles. And so he kept it in their hands throughout to get it all done. At least that's my understanding of the mechanics of it. The basket's going to show up in a little bit, and that's got a testimony as well, which you've already intimated to a little bit.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I think going down the aisles part you're talking about, I think that was exactly what they were doing, right? Because you figure you've got them 50, 50, 50, 50, or hundreds and hundreds, or whatever it was. And what you started with was that idea they had to go through each one of those groups. Okay, did everybody get some? All right, let's go to the next. Did everybody get some? Okay, as opposed to 20,000 people. Who's going to manage that? It's like the population of Kona. Can't manage that. So
I don't take it that literally, and I think we're looking at it from a very Western way, and they're coming at it from a very Eastern relational way, and the numbers are approximations, and it's.
okay.
I doubt there were rows. Like look up YouTube
I do too.
stuff in Africa. There's not rows. There's 1 million people as far as the eye can see at some gathering. And so I think they're, for the sake of brevity of the Bible, I think they're giving these approximations because it's an Eastern, very relational culture, and we're this kind of Western structure. I mean, I love structure. I just got done playing with the spreadsheet and so many doing these things, but I feel like the Lord's been retraining my mind and how I see some of these things of that. Yeah, it's so people aren't missed, so people are connected. That's why, we're not under 9 pop-up tents right now. We're a small group because we can know each other's name and things like that. So
you'd be more of the idea they may be in groups of 50 or 100, but it'll be kind of irregular clumps.
125,
Yeah.
75, yeah.
32.
Because you have your family clumps,
Yeah.
think about it. You've got 5 little families, 10 big families. Some other families got, relatives all in that area because they're herders or something. And the other guy's a, cobbler or whatever, and his family's not around or something. So I think, you're going to naturally kind of gather in those, just like we'll see Sunday morning.
Sure, Benedict groups, absolutely. They certainly will. But in either case, then you guys are all hitting on the same thing, that there's this relational to make sure everybody's taken care of.
Yeah.
Kathy?
Well, I just kind of observation too, when you get a group of people that large, there's usually chaos, and to think these people are probably hungry. And he and I used to do truck ministry. We take food down into the slums downtown Austin and feed the homeless. And those people were so polite, stood in line and waited their turn. They did not, it reminds me of this story. They did not raise a ruckus or steal from each other. At least it didn't say they did. Steal from each other or we want to go first or whatever. It seems like it was just a very calm situation.
Well, I got a thought to add to that. That's okay.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of people, they came to listen to Jesus. They had to be in a location where one person could speak and everybody could hear. So there had to be, the geography had to be to where if somebody spoke really loud, everybody could hear it.
This kind of speaks why they're probably on a mountain, because, you know, if you're above, right, where we live here, if somebody could be up here on the hill in the morning and hardly talking at all, right? Because there's nothing blocking it. I mean, you can hear every single word they said.
So somebody mentioned that in one of the Gospels, it was on the hill.
Yeah, John did.
Okay, so I'm envisioning one person, probably, maybe Jesus, instructing everybody because they came to listen to him anyway.
Right.
And he's saying, okay, everybody, this is what I need you to do right now, and just running the show that way.
Well, you know, I like the practicality you guys are sharing, and I'll say this, and you use the word chaos, right? And you think about 20,000 hungry people.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And the picture I got is you see these people that go to refugee camps and people that bring in, you know, airlift food into places where people are hungry, and you just see the crush of the crowd. Jesus has experienced the crush of the crowd, by the way. He always has a way of getting away from that. So one way to stave that off would be to say, okay, everybody, however systematic it might be, let's all sit down, let's get in our groups, let's sit down, right? And that just calms it all down. I think and whether that's all true or not, you know, whether that's exactly what happened, you know, I think we also miss the point that as miraculous as Jesus is, as just the amazing things he does, there's also a lot of practicality in what he teaches and demonstrates, right? I mean, logic is a part of God's, and that was my thought. I had a pastor years ago who used to always say, God is a God of order. And he always said, you know, why else would he have a book called Numbers? I thought that was a funny statement. But you know, God is a God of order. And so certainly he knows how to order things. I mean, we look at our universe. It's a very orderly universe. And so one way to stop all the mayhem, all the chaos, everybody sit down. We're going to take care of it, right? And you know that, Kurt, to your point, when you're in a crowd situation and things aren't going well, to have one calm voice.
Got to be a leader.
Yeah, it really does. As opposed to, I remember when we came back from our honeymoon and we were in Montego Bay, Jamaica, and the planes were delayed and the air conditioning blew out and there was no food and there were like 3,000 people in the terminal. We were pretty gnarly after about 20 minutes, and we could have really used a calm voice that we had none of in that place. Remember that? So yeah.
I could
I
almost
agree.
see, sorry, one last idea if I can.
Yeah.
I almost see this as a ministry recruiting tool. It's not just a matter of being organized and keeping the people calm instead of inciting a riot, but a group of 50 or 100 or even 150, and there's that Dunbar's number. You can only really know 150 people at a time.
Right.
After that, you have to start compartmentalizing. Well, if you break people down into those groups, cream rises to the top. You start figuring out who's the leader of this group or who's the leader in this group, who's going to kind of stand up and say, hey, yeah, let's just listen to this guy and let's just kind of follow along and everybody be cool. You know, we'll just get this taken care of. That's when he's going to notice, hey, I don't just have 12 people here. I have all these different ones that are potential the next group out. And indeed, Luke, shortly after that, tells the story of sending out the 72. Without a whole lot of indication about where did he find those, I imagine that a crowd of 5,000 plus their, attached entourage is probably a great place to find 72 high quality mission-oriented people. And by by providing the initial stage of organization, besides just the practical effects, it's, hey, now we're all going to see in real time who's the likely people that are going to join and grow and be our next step outward.
Yeah, that's good. That's a great conjecture, and you're right. That's coming down the path. So that sounds like a seminary paper just waiting to be written there. You guys don't know, but Trent just got accepted by Fuller Seminary, and so
Hey, congratulations.
There you go.
so he's got a lot of fun papers in his near future. John.
I would like to just, I'm thinking of what would be a practical application of having everybody broken down into small groups. And one of the things, I'm learning ukulele. We get together and there's maybe 20 people or more, and they pick a song and they go through it and everybody's trying to strum, but it's after the song is played, the question, well, what did that mean? How did you do that? What's this beat like? And what I envision is after he has spoken and given the truth that he's had to offer, everybody's sitting down. Now they're waiting for the food, and they have a chance to murmur among themselves, to share, and that opens opportunities for them to ask questions. What did this mean? What is he? Did you see what he did? Look at that. He's got gray hair or whatever, But those are the kinds of things that people do, and it allows you to own the certain, to own Christ. That's what I'm thinking.
Well, as you were saying that, the thing I was reminded of is when Ezra preached, and it says in the recounting of Ezra preaching that the priests were going out among the people and teaching as he was preaching. So there was the big crowd in Jerusalem, but there were those who were doing individualized instruction in the midst. And how that mechanically worked, I don't know. I mean, I would not like it on Sunday if I was preaching and I had somebody over there going, now let me take what he just said. It's like, I don't know what I just said. I remember I had a gal years ago that there was a guy in the service who didn't speak English. He was a Spanish speaker, and she was translating for him, during my sermon. Now, I preached in a sermon where I had a translator for the group. This was an individual translator, and it took me a while to get used to having that monologue going on behind that. But I like your idea about that, that there's that kind of instruction in the aftermath. It kind of goes to where Trent was. You might find out very quickly who got it, who was on board with Jesus, right? And so, you start to see that kind of play out. By the way, Trent, you also talked about I'm sorry, I'm reading your what you wrote too. It's like I'm getting way too much input here. It's said so now everybody wants to
You gotta read it, but
what?
can they see it?
They can see it. Yeah, they all got it on their screen.
That's funny.
A bird in the hand may be worth two in the bush, but if you can kill two birds with
One stop.
You're talking about 150 people. Yeah, it's been said that, churches of 500, 600, 700 people, and everybody expects their pastor to know their name and know them and know their details. He cannot.
And come visit him once a week.
Yeah, he
Right.
cannot. He cannot. And so, that's something that Rick Warren teaches in Purpose Driven Church. It's not Purpose Driven Life, Driven Church, is, I heard him speak probably 12, 13, 14 years ago. And their church at that point was running about 20,000 a week. And he said, and he had the number, it wasn't general. He's like, we have 9,962 small groups
Wow.
at Saddleback Church of no more than 20 people in any one. Because Rick Warren cannot minister to 20,000 people.
Yeah.
But if he's got somebody that can minister to 10 to 20, then everybody gets taken care of. It's a powerful modeling that we see Jesus doing here. So, you mentioned it earlier, and I asked the question, what do you notice about what was left over after everybody was fed?
Might I just add something about the question previous about what might motivate Jesus to seat up the people?
Go ahead.
The thought that came to me was that if the people were seated, then it didn't matter how tall you were going to be able to see what was happening, and you would see that the disciples, when they're walking among all these people, these baskets never get empty. You know, that there would be a clear view of what was going on for everybody.
Well, I like the idea of the clear view. I've been to enough concerts in my time and stood behind a guy that's 6'3". That's never fun. And he puts his girlfriend on his shoulders.
Oh,
Yeah. So I like that, Paula, because that way they get to witness the miracle.
Right.
It's kind of a cool thought. It's kind of a cool thought. Yeah. So the baskets don't show up till the end, is what it looks like. The baskets, and what you got to know about these baskets was that was kind of standard issue among Jewish people of Jesus's day. You'd have your lunch in there, you'd have provisions, whatever. So how many baskets does it say that there were?
12.
12. And how many disciples were there?
Well,
Preston mentioned about the Exodus, and I just want to make mention of this. There are some commentators, some scholars, who will absolutely overstate the connection between the feeding of the 5,000 and trying to draw all these parallels back to the Jewish people in the desert, the wilderness. They're in the wilderness doing the 5,000, right? And yet there's other commentators like, dude, let it go. You don't have to draw all these connections. There may be some, but you don't have to, right? I mean, there is a sense of God's provision, right? Like the manna, for example. But, you know, any of those quote unquote types are going to fall apart at some point. And Israel in the wilderness falls apart because basically they disobeyed God and all of them died. So you can't go but so far with that. All of the original generation died. So you can't draw it too close. But so, you know, because they're like, well, there are 12 baskets because there's 12 tribes of Israel. Give me a break. There are 12 disciples. Come on, let's not. What is that? What is that? Occam's razor? What is it that says whatever's
All else is equal. The simplest answer is the right one.
Yeah, whatever the simplest answer is the right one. Occam's razor, right? I watch Big Bang Theory. So yeah, there's 12 disciples, so there's 12 baskets because everybody would have 12 baskets. So they had the job to go out and do the miracle. So I'm sorry, I'm getting fired up.
That's cool.
These guys get paid big money to write these commentaries, and I go, man, that was wasted money. So, so what do you notice about what was left over? And you actually said it earlier. What did you say about that? What do you say about what was left over?
Well, I said they're going to go continue after Jesus, and he says, "I'm here to feed my sheep." You're going to be feeding my sheep, and there's one for every single one of them.
Yeah.
To continue dealing with human needs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But, you know, it's very difficult to preach to somebody who's hungry.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to share God's love with somebody who's crawling in the street. You got to pick them up. You got to help them to feel like a human being in order to touch them, to reach them.
Oh, very true. You know, like be warm and fed, right? That he talked about that. Be warm and fed. It's like, no, take care of them. But you said something else even more fundamental than that. You said when they were done, there was more left
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
than what they started with.
That's amazing.
Isn't it? What does that speak to?
God's provision. There's more. And it's funny because, you know, I'm crazy with this wheelchair ministry.
Right.
And it only started to explode when I stopped trying to write all the checks.
When you stop trying,
When I invited other people to follow me with what we were doing to bless people. And it transformed everything. And talk about excess provision. The first year that I did an event where we invited other people to participate and contribute, we raised $3,000 and we matched it. So we were able to donate 40 wheelchairs, which I was blown away. So the next year I said, all right, Lord, we're going to rock this. We're going to go up 25% and we're going to deliver 50 wheelchairs. We're going to raise $7,500. And I'm doing a 3-day training event. And at the end of the first day, you tell people what you're doing so they can pray about it, think about it. You have 2 more days to hopefully do well. And the next morning, it was abysmal. And at lunch, I swear I got a divine download because God said, hey, knucklehead, that's a thing for me. What are you trying to do? I said, I'm trying to raise money. He said, no, what are you trying to do? I'm trying to raise money to buy wheelchairs. He said, come on, what are you really trying to do? We're trying to deliver wheelchairs, and a wheelchair is $150. So we stopped counting dollars. We started counting wheelchairs. Things really started to change, and stuff was coming out of my mouth that wasn't coming out of my brain. Like, if anybody donates $5,000, Audrey and I will pay for your trip to come and distribute wheelchairs with us. And she's in the back of the room. And so, but anyway, by the end of the 3rd day, we had raised enough money to buy 183 wheelchairs.
and what was your goal?
50.
Okay.
It gets better though, because now we come back from the last break and I'm calling out to my people in the back of the room, what's the number? Because now every break we're reporting and getting people excited. 183. And so somebody ran up and, with a piece of paper with the number on it. And I announced 183. And then I hear from the back of the room, we just got a text. If this guy can bring his daughter, he'll donate 17 wheelchairs and make it a total of 200. We raised $30,000 4 times. So that's why I'm saying with God's provision, it is nothing close to what we can do. And there's your 12 baskets or, 200 wheelchairs.
Yeah,
I mean, and from there, it's just exploded from there.
absolutely.
So, yeah, I mean, this particular gospel passage is just
Speaks to what you guys
it's
are doing.
so right,
Yeah.
and overflowing with God's abundance. And that's, that to me, I think is the biggest thing that comes out of this is if you live in a scarcity world, you're in the worst possible hell you could be in. That's it. And God gives us this massive abundance.
Yeah, you speak such truth there. I run into so many people who have a scarcity mindset, even believers who have a scarcity mindset.
Mm-hmm.
We see it a lot here on the island, a scarcity mindset, as opposed to saying, we have abundance. I hear that in a very material way. I hear that on this island, right? People talk about scarcity. It's like, guys, do you know we can grow almost anything?
Yeah.
Almost anything on this island? And so it's like, get away from the scarcity mindset. And certainly as a believer, as you say, I think about McCoy Church, the old church downtown. They needed, the place has fallen down, and they needed millions. And they didn't know where they were going to get it. They've been trying and trying and trying, and finally the pastor kind of stopped trying. And they had an angel come in, an angel donator came in and gave them like almost the whole thing. Here you go. Well, check. And he's going, I don't know where that came from. I said, yeah, I do. I know exactly where it came from.
I mean, it was bad. We were at Christmas Eve service and we were getting hit up to get this. It was awkwardly, desperately. It's like,
Yeah, because they were back up against it. They were going to condemn the building.
They were meeting outside already, but I'm saying we were being hit up to give at a Christmas Eve service.
Yeah.
It's just
Not a comfortable place to be.
weird, really weird.
So yeah, I asked that question, but I think everybody kind of knows what the answer to that is, right? It's just the fact that after it was all said or done, there was more than when they started with. And God is a God of abundance. And this has been so, and I know Trent, this is one of your little jags and mine as well, you know, as we get into hearing about the prosperity gospel. And it's all about what God can do for you. It's like that's never been what it's been about. You know, it's been about ministering to others and proclaiming his name and his glory.
So
you guys got anything before I go to the very end?
I was going to say it's important that it's not just abundance, but it's the right abundance.
Right.
And earlier, he was compassionate for the people with what they need, and there's no other I had no other ideas on the table, and here they are, ate and satisfied.
That's
They don't have abundance and want more abundance. They say, "Hey, I got a house. Now I need that car that goes with it. Hey, I got the car. Now I need my private jet. Hey, I got a private jet. Now I need the, rock star and the football quarterback friends." No, they gave them the right abundance and they were satisfied by it. He knew exactly what they needed and gave more than they needed it.
Amen. Now, in all fairness, if you read the back end of John 6, right, which is the parallel, a lot of them didn't get it. And when he went back across the lake, they chased after him because they wanted another meal. And that's when he says, wait a minute, I am the bread, And so he kind of explains that. So we, what you guys have said, I mean, as we're providing for people, right, is they need to know where it came from, which I know you guys are doing that, absolutely doing that, Well, so kind of the final, I'm probably not going to get to the last question, but at least I'll leave you guys to kind of think on this one. Maybe we'll follow up next week and talk about it. But John alone notes this reaction of the people after the miracle. And let's go look at John. Let's go see what he says over there in John 6 again. And then we'll kind of finish up with this. Because it's a little different. It says, verse 13 of John chapter 6. It says, therefore they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with the fragments of the barley loaves, which were left over by those who had eaten.
Yeah.
Okay. Then those men, when they had seen the sign that Jesus did, said, this is truly the prophet who is to come into the world. And we talked about that prophet in our lesson last week. And this is looking back at Deuteronomy 18, 15 through 19, which some were thinking that Jesus might have been that prophet that Moses is talking about. Then it says this, therefore, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, he departed again to the mountain by himself alone. And so, as can so often be the case, people take what God is doing in the wrong way, right? And so John talks about that. And of course, what's going to happen after that is they're going back across the river, back across the lake, and we're going to see Jesus walking on the water. That's the last part, and we'll look at that next week as we finish up Mark chapter 6. But I'll leave you guys with this because we're out of time. And if we want to follow up with this next week, maybe we can. I'll leave a little bit of room on the front end of this. Why do you think all four gospel writers included this miracle? And I think I've kind of gotten the answer from talking to you guys tonight about it, because it has such kingdom principles that are usable for us. But maybe think about that, and we'll start next week with that idea. Because as I said at the beginning, this is the only one of the miracles that Jesus performed. And, certainly they all talk about his death, burial, and resurrection, and that's its own miracle and all of that. But these that he did prior to his crucifixion, this is the only miracle in all four gospels. And so you got to say that has import, as far as kingdom principles go. So I know you guys will be back in Florida by next week, right? Yeah. Okay. But if you ever want to dial in with us and be late, like some of these guys,
So would be midnight.
yeah.
That's right.
Well, Preston's normally in Virginia, so he's on your time zone. He's one sooner now.
Yeah.
And then we have actually had a couple Rodney and Susan, who live in Nova Scotia.
Oh,
They're actually an hour later
right.
than you guys.
Yeah.
So we're looking to go around the world with this thing. I can't wait till we get the, when we go to Italy this fall, get some people to join
Seven
us.
AM will be 7 PM
So that'll be
in
great.
Hawaii.
But for tonight, we'll just call it here. And then again, next week, we'll finish up Mark chapter 6. We'll look at Jesus walking on the water.